Jungkook rushed into the hospital, his footsteps echoing down the sterile corridor. His heart was pounding in his chest, a storm of worry and fear threatening to crush him. As he reached the private room, his eyes landed on her, Somi, laying pale and silent on the hospital bed. Her eyes, once bright with mischief and warmth, were now filled with unspeakable sorrow. The moment Somi saw Jungkook, she tried to sit up, struggling against the pain and weakness. Jungkook hurried to her side and gently helped her up. Her hands clutched at his shirt as he pulled him into a trembling embrace. Tears streamed down her face, soaking into his shoulder. Jungkook didn't cry, but his eyes shimmered. He was holding back an ocean. For a long moment, they stayed like that, just two of them wrapped in silence and pain. Eventually, Somi pulled back slightly. Her trembling fingers reached up to touch Jungkook's cheeks, brushing a stray lock of hair from his forehead. "Somi, I should have listened to you," she whispered. "If I had, maybe none of this would have happened. I wasted so much of my life casting shadows." Jungkook gently shook his head. "Let's not talk about that now." Somi's voice trembled with rage and sorrow. "Somi, they killed them in front of me. I watched everything. I could not do anything, nothing." Her breath hitched as she broke down into fresh sobs. "I want revenge, Jungkook. I want to destroy them." Seeing her like this, Jungkook pulled her close again, holding her tightly. He could feel her body trembling, and he knew she was on the edge. "Jungkook, this kind of stress isn't good for you right now," he said softly, trying to calm her. "But I promise you, I have been tracking Shane for a long time. He is cunning. Every move he makes is calculated. It took me months to get the information I needed, but I will make him pay for everything." There was silence for a moment, broken only by the soft hum of machine in the room. Then Somi looked up at him with anxious eyes. "Somi, my baby, how are they?" At her question, Jungkook froze. The softness in his eyes flickered for a second. He didn't know how to answer. Silence settled down between them again. "Somi, Jungkook," she said, her voice beginning to shake. "Are they all right?" Without waiting for a second, a storm of panic erupted inside her. She tried to get out of bed, tearing the blanket, heart thudding wildly. "Somi, I want to see them. I want to go now." Jungkook gently held her back, trying to calm her down. "Jungkook, the babies are at home. I will take you to them. But first, let me talk to the doctor. We will leave when he says it's safe." "Somi, I said I want to go now," she cried. Just then, the doctor entered the room and did a quick assessment. "Doctor, the patient's body is still extremely weak," the doctor said firmly. "It's better if she stays one more night under observation. You can take her home tomorrow." Somi shook her head in protest, but Jungkook held her hand tightly. "Jungkook, please," he said gently, "just for tonight." Reluctantly, Somi gave in. She lay back down, defeated and anxious, her heart aching for her children. The day had shattered her, but the night was still waiting to take what was left for her strength. The house was quiet, almost too quiet. Wine sat alone in the nursery after putting the children to sleep. Their soft breathing filled the room, a gentle rhythm that offered no comfort. She looked at them, her eyes lingering on their teeny faces, and for a moment her heart clenched. They had no idea how broken their mother was, how much she wanted to scream into the silence, but she didn't, she could not. She walked to the edge of the bed and sat down slowly, her back straight, her eyes empty. Everything that had happened today felt like a distant illusion, a dream she was foolish enough to believe. The dress, the candlelight dinner, the way Jungkook had looked at her like she meant something, all of it, and then he left. He didn't hesitate, he didn't explain, he didn't look back. He left her sitting there with a rose behind her ear and hope in her eyes, only to have it all crushed under the weight of reality. Maybe the children's real mother was back. Maybe one's place was temporary all along. Maybe she was just filling a space in his life that never belongs to her. She lay back down, pressing her palm against her chest as if that would calm the storm inside, but the ache would not leave. It was in her bones, in her blood, in every breath she took. One point of view, why did I allow myself to feel something again? Why did I believe this man, this house, this life could ever be mine? Her fingers brushed against her cheek. Wait, she hadn't even realized she was crying again. It wasn't new. She had cried enough to fill oceans in the past few weeks, but these tears were different. These weren't born from anger or loneliness. These were kind that came when hope dies. That night, she didn't sleep. She just sat there, curled in a corner of her heart, watching the piece of herself quietly fall apart. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she was starting to understand something terrifying. Sometimes the person you trust the most can still walk away without saying goodbye, and sometimes love is not enough to make them stay. Morning had broken, but there was no warmth in the sun. Wine opened her eyes to find an unsettling silence around her, the kind of quiet that made everything feel just a little too still. She slowly stepped out of bed, wrapped her shawl tightly around her, and walked toward the hallway. The house was far from lifeless. Everything was moving, working, whispering, but not for her. Stepping outside, she saw maids bustling about, florists arranging bouquets and staff polishing corners of the mansion that had long been forgotten. It wasn't the usual rhythm of the day. This was something different, something special, and it had nothing to do with her. As one stood quietly near the veranda, she overheard two maids talking just around the corner. Maid 1. After so many months, young Miss is finally returning. Everything must be perfect, said one of the younger maids, clutching a bunch of fresh red roses in her hands. Maid 2. Yes, especially the red roses. They are her favorite, another replied. Maid 3. And don't mess up anything. If master finds even one mistake, we are finished. Wine's breath caught in her throat. Young miss, the words echoed in her ears like a bitter reminder. So she was really coming back. Her place, her home, her people, her roses. One stood frozen, invisible among them, like a shadow clinging to a corner of a painting that never belongs to her. She turned slowly and made her way to the kitchen. Inside it was chaotic in the most precise way. Shapes moving rapidly, spaces being cursed, dishes simmering, and the headmaid directing every move in the military precision. Headmaid, the saffron rice should be done first, and don't forget, no garlic in the mushroom soup. She hates it. Where are the table napkins? Not white. She likes cream. The instruction went on and on. Not once did anyone notice her standing in the doorway. Not once did anyone say her name. She backed away, unnoticed, unimportant. Her steps felt heavier than usual, her chest tighter. She could not tell if it was the smell of celebration in the air or the undeniable ache of being replaced that made her feel nauseous. With trembling feet, she turned toward the nursery, the only place in the world where little hearts beat for her, where tiny arms still wrapped around her without question. But even as she walked there, she knew this house was preparing for someone's ills. The world she had just begun to believe in was already shifting, gently, cruelly, away from her, and she had now had to stand. One stepped into the nursery just as the soft rustle of blankets signaled the twins had woken. Teeny giggles echoed the moment they saw her. With excited little squeals and clumsy curls, they made their way toward her, arms stretched and eyes twinkling with innocent joy. Her heart swelled painfully. Will they still reach for me tomorrow? Will these little arms still wrap around me the same way when she returns? She dropped to her knees and pulled them both into her embrace, her cheeks brushing against the fine air of their tiny heads. They smelled of talcum and milk, her favorite scent in the world, the only place where she still felt like she belonged. Time lost all meaning in that room. One fed them with her own hands, laughing at their messy little faces smeared with porridge. She changed their diapers, talked to them in soft whisper, and listened with wonder as they responded with bubbles and wide-eyed sounds of discovery. Ah, Ma! Her eyes stung with tears every time a syllable escaped their lips. She knew they were trying to speak, trying to tell her something in their own little language, so she listened, not just with her ears but with her entire being. This was her heaven, their gurgle, their giggles, their warmth. With them, she could forget everything, the house preparing for someone else, the fear in her chest, the ache in her bones, the past, the future. None of it mattered when they looked at her as if she were their entire world. But the moment shattered like glass, the second of rumbles of engines pierced the quiet. One instinctively turned toward the window. She stood still, heart pounding, as she saw a convoy of black cars pulling up in front of the mansion, one after another, polished and dark. Their arrival was no coincidence. They had come, she had come. No one needed to tell her, no one needed to call her name. She knew. She clutched the twins closer, burying their face in their soft curls as if she could hide them reality in their scent. Her fingers trembled, but her face stayed composed. Only her eyes betrayed her as they stared out the window, quiet and haunted. One stood, cradling the babies, not moving, not blinking, just watching, as if by watching she could delay time, as if by holding them she could hold on to something she feared she was already losing. And outside, the house welcomed a woman who was never she. The mansion held its breath as Jungkook stepped inside with Somi beside him. A wave of anticipation washed over the staff. Maids lined the hallway, guards straightened their postures, and the entire household seemed to shimmer with restrained emotion. Headmaid, welcome home, young miss. The headmaid greeted with a smile. One's eye glistened and she smiled back, though a part of her still trying to process everything around her. Jungkook gently guided her toward the main living room when they both settled on the plush sofa. Somi turned her head quickly toward him. Somi, where are my babies? She asked, her voice a mixture of excitement and urgency. I want to see them. Jungkook paused just for a second, but it was enough. Headmaid quickly stepped forward, sensing the discomfort. Headmaid, Leo and Hazel are in the nursery, young ma'am. If you would like, I can take you there. Somi's force forward. Somi, Leo and Hazel? She turned toward Jungkook, her expression visibly confused. Somi, but I never chose those names, so Jungkook did? There was a short silence. Then Somi simply smiled. Somi, that's fine. If that's what he named them, I will call them that too. She stood gracefully, brushing imaginary dust from her dress, and followed the headmaid toward the nursery. The moment Somi entered the softly lit room, her steps faltered. There, standing with both babies in her arms, was a young woman. She was rocking them gently, her face calm, eyes full of unspoken stories. The babies were nestled against her like they belonged to now her ears. Somi's breath caught in her throat. She didn't say anything at first. She simply stepped forward and reached out. The woman hesitated only a moment before quietly placing both children into Somi's arms. Somi held them gently, desperately. Her shoulders trembled as she buried her face into their necks. Tears streamed freely down her cheeks. Somi, my babies, they have grown so much, she whispered through sobs. They have learned how to curl. They are bigger, stronger, and I missed all of it. What kind of mother misses this? What kind of mother am I? The twins didn't cry, they didn't pull away, but they didn't smile either. They simply stared, curious, confused, at the woman whose arms were unfamiliar but warm, a stranger who kept as though she had lost something irreplaceable. Somi kissed their heads again and again, her tears falling on their tiny shoulders. One stood frozen, her eyes. It wasn't breaking, it had already broken long before, but now it felt like something inside her slowly began thrown away piece by piece. This was not her moment. She didn't belong in that room anymore. Not while the mother cried. Without a word, one turned around and quietly walked out of the nursery. She entered the bedroom, her room, and shut the door behind her. No one called her name, no one asked where she was going. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands resting on her lap, eyes blank. She looked around the room that had once held meaning. Her breathing was slow, but her chest felt heavy, too heavy. Outside that room, a mother had returned. Inside this one, a woman began to disappear. The entire day passed quietly. Night fell, but one stepped into their room. The maids had knocked several times, politely reminding her it was time for dinner, but she hadn't responded, not once. The silence inside the room echoed louder than any word could. Jungkook wasn't home. He had left for a mission and was expected to return tomorrow. In his absence, Wine felt oddly unguarded. She lay still in bed, eyes fixed on the ceiling, mouth sealed in silence. Inside her, a storm raged, wild, endless, but there was no pain anymore. Pain had gone long ago, eroded into numbness. She had been wounded too many times but still bled. She didn't sleep, she just existed. The night passed in heavy breath. Morning. Wine finally rose and walked slowly to the nursery. She stopped at the doorway, her step fluttering. There inside, Somi was playing with the twins. They were laughing, crawling, and reaching for her, clinging to her skirt like she was their world, as if Wine had never been a part of their lives, as if they had already forgotten her. She watched for a moment, then quietly turned and left. The rest of her day was spent locked inside her room. She didn't step out. She waited, not for a moment of hope, but for release, for someone to say, "It's time to leave. You are no longer needed." And maybe deep down she wished they would. In the nursery, later that afternoon, the twins had fallen asleep in their cribs. Somi and the headmaid sat nearby, the room filled with soft light and quiet reflection. Somi's voice broke the stillness. "Somi, they must have suffered so much without me. I will never leave them again, never." The headmaid nodded gently. "Headmaid, after you fell into the coma, Mrs. Jeon took care of them as if they were her own." Somi blinked. "Mrs. Jeon?" The headmaid saw the confusion bloom on her face and smiled, albeit hesitantly. She knew Somi had no idea. No one had told her about the marriage, about the new life had taken form in her absence. "Headmaid, our young master, he got married." Somi looked Jungkook stunned. The word hit her like a crashing wave. Jungkook didn't tell her about his marriage. Somi, I want to see her, she whispered. Headmaid, the woman who was holding the baby yesterday, that was Mrs. Jeon, she explained. Somi's expression shifted, and old joy lit up her face, genuine, unguarded joy. Somi, take me to her, please, I want to meet her. She was almost childish in her eagerness, barely able to contain the rush of emotions spilling over. Her eyes danced, and she started pulling her toward the hallway. Ben came running, breathless. Ben, boss has been shot. He is in critical condition. The doctor says he might not survive. Gas filled the room. No one waited for instruction. Within moments, everyone was rushing to the hospital. At the hospital, Wayne was the last to arrive. A maid had rushed to her room breathlessly, delivering the news. She hadn't spoken, she had simply run. Now she stood in the corridor of the emergency wings. The sterile white walls buzzed under the fluorescent lights. Everyone was gathered outside the operating room. Somi was crying uncontrollably. Her sobs filled the hallway like the echo of a storm. One stood apart, her face pale, her eyes brimming with silent tears. The door finally opened, and the doctor stepped out. Doctor, the operation is complete, but his condition is critical, the doctor said gravely. We can't say yet if he will survive. The words shattered the room. Somi clasped her chest, gasping. Somi, I want to see Jungkook. I have to see him. Doctor, ma'am, I'm sorry, the doctor began, but in his condition. Somi, do you know who you are talking about? She snapped. I will see him. Without another word, she stormed toward Jungkook's room and disappeared inside. One remained behind. She didn't move. She could not. Her legs felt heavy, like they no longer belonged to her. Her eyes fixed on the closed door ahead. Was she allowed to go in? Did she even have the right anymore? She didn't know. So she simply stood there, motionless, as the words spun around her, her chest rising and falling with silent grief, her soul urging with uncertainty. The love she had quietly built was now on the edge of loss, both the man and her place in his world.